Welcome to Creating Great Grooming Dogs. And this is Together We're Better Behavior Chats, because I really want my audience to know that there are so many people out there working on this type of stuff with our dogs and other types of animals, working on cooperative care. And the whole goal is to help these dogs learn to be good for grooming. And today we have Kayce Cover, who is a friend and mentor who I met back in, God, I think 2005.
Yeah, it's been a
I
while.
went to one of your seminars in 2005 with Isa. Good God, that was a long time ago.
Seems
Kayce
like
works with,
yesterday.
it does seem like yesterday. Kayce works with a wide variety of animals and has been working with animals since the 70s. And I don't even know where to start with introducing Kayce. So hi, Kayce.
Hey, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I've been really looking forward to it.
Me too.
So, Kayce, what would you like groomers to know about teaching animals to be good for care, for cooperative care? For you've worked with so many different types of animals. What do you think the beginner groomer really should think about?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the advantage that it gives you as a groomer when you take a cooperative attitude with the animal. And it comes down to a lot of different benefits for taking some extra time because we're all pressed for time and we already have habits. I think that's the hardest thing is if you find a new idea, you might think, oh, this is really great. I think this could really work. But when it comes right down to it, you have a streamlined habit of doing it one way. And to even try that other way, you have to stop your habits. That's very laborious at first.
And it
So
always feels like you're taking more time because you're not
it
on
does.
autopilot anymore.
That is an astute observation. It's like all of a sudden you're aware of the time, and so it seems longer.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so of the benefits, you have greater safety, and that is so many things. I mean, I've read horror stories about dogs hanging to death in a groomer salon, or falling off a table, or getting burnt, or it goes on and on. I see tools that have no idea if they are great. They might be wonderful because I don't have intense experience as a groomer. Um, but I'm can see potential risks. And one that comes to mind is these like hammock seats
Hmm.
that the dog hangs from the ceiling.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't have any opinions about these things, but
Well, I
because
can give you a quick opinion on that one,
yeah, go
which
ahead.
is for some dogs, I think some dogs are having trouble standing and find those comfortable, and other dogs find those scary. So, from my point of view, whatever tool we're using, we have to think about what that individual animal is feeling in that moment. So,
Yeah.
I had one older dog, I had her in one of those so that her feet were touching the table, but she wasn't weight bearing. And she relaxed right into it, like, oh, this is marvelous. This is
Yeah.
really going to help with like the foot stuff. And then other animals that are like, oh, heck no. But you do see way too many videos of animals being forced through because now we have made it so that they can't struggle effectively. And
Uh,
that's a misuse of a tool.
so let's talk about that related to safety. As you mentioned, I work with a wide variety of animals. It's been over 120 different species. And I can tell you that there are types of animals that are notorious for holding a grudge. So
Okay.
whatever you do today, it's not just what results are you able to get today, it's how does that change your future with that animal? So, two animals that are notorious for that are Asian elephants, and I've heard various cat trainers say lions are more like that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not arguing with them. That's not my specialty. I've worked with those animals, but I don't do that over and over again. But I can tell you dolphins, yes, definitely.
Well,
So
we all remember somebody who mistreated us. If we
something that's
feel we were
even
treated unfairly or with something
or
was
just
scary.
without respect,
Yeah.
just without respect. So you've got, will the animal hurt itself? Will it hurt you? Will it be traumatized and not want to return back? Will it have an illness because of, this trauma that he entertains? And the crazy thing about it is with exotic animals, an animal can die on the spot, not because anybody mistreats it, but because the stimulus stacks up and they just get to a meltdown point. And if you start to see that happening, you've got to just back off. Well, it's not as likely to happen for dogs because dogs are bred to withstand human conditions, but it can be traumatizing to them. And anybody that has ever suffered any kind of insult or violation knows how it can fester. I think the saying is living rent free in your mind.
Yep.
So the first thing, and on that, there's all kinds of scientific evidence that those neural pathways will loop onto themselves and just almost like the animal will have a hard time escaping thinking about those things. So the first thing is the safety. The second thing is your ease and comfort. Let's forget about the animal for a minute and just say, do you want to groom an animal that's constantly wishing it could bite you? Or ready to snap? Or trying to jump off your table or whatever? So why wouldn't you want to solve those issues? Why wouldn't you want that animal to be put at ease so that you can also have an easier time? And the only reason I can imagine that you wouldn't want that is because you might think it would take a lot of time to create that animal. And so I'd like to just segue into the topic of what are animals capable of and how quickly do they learn. And when you tell people about name and explain, which is a practice that I actually came up with a name for, it's a narrative that expresses what's going on around the animal, what will go on, what is going on, what has gone on. And when you do that, we find that we can name, strange number, but 13 body parts in 1 minute. And the animal will functionally remember those the next time it goes to the vet or the groomers. So we didn't initially expect that. I would have thought that you'd have to spend a minute on a body part. Not at all. So why would you want to tell the animal its body part? So that he's prepared mentally for what you're going to do.
I use a
And
lot of name and explain with grooming. And so any groomers who are out there listening and thinking about this, just for an animal to know where you're going to place the clippers next,
yep,
or what you're going to touch, or where you're going to brush, or what tool you're going to use.
what direction you'll put the pressure on.
Yep. And it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily show you that they know all of those names, but they pick up on all of them very,
And,
very quickly.
and here's a tip that you've probably already covered, but just in case, when you give an animal instructions, they need just to the count of 3 to process them. Not talking about 3 seconds. I will often say to people, suggest that you say, tell me when you're ready, or are you ready? And so it's going to be something like, I'm going to touch your ear. I'm going to comb your ear. Tell me when you're ready. And they will tell you. What they will often do is get very quiet and their eyes will get a soft focus. They won't be looking around to see what's coming in the environment. They'll just look down and to the right just a tiny bit, get quiet. That's your cue. So then what we do is we start the intermediate bridge as we reach. So it's tell, explain, count to 3, and then execute and start the intermediate bridge as you start to execute. So why? Well, the intermediate bridge is a signal that tells the animal that you're on the path to success. You don't have to do anything different. If you keep on as you are, you will meet success. So the dog is there and he's relaxed and steady, and you're the one that's changing. And so you use that intermediate bridge to anchor that dog to his calm, relaxed mode of being, which, Chrissy, you talked about what you desire is for the dog to be like a posable action figure.
Yep. Yep. I
And
mentioned that pretty often. Yep.
And the intermediate bridge is a great way to communicate that to that dog, because you can put them in a pose and you say, okay, good, steady, good, 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 as you do your stuff. And that gives them the confidence to withstand that gentle push from the clippers or the pull as you're pulling the hair. I'm
Well, and
never,
I think too, for a lot of our animals, if they aren't hearing anything, they think that we've checked out,
yeah,
that we're not paying attention. So, and I haven't really taught anybody the intermediate bridge on the show because I'm like, I'll wait for Kayce to come on. But like if I'm teaching stay with a dog, once they're sitting or in a down or in a stand and they're in a stay, to be able to indicate to them, you are doing right now. You're
yeah,
doing and you're doing it well. And they look at you like, oh, is this what you wanted the whole time? Because I've just been waiting for the
exactly.
next thing. I didn't know this was a thing,
What we
you know?
could do is just before the very end, we can go over how to teach the bridges.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason that I developed the bridge in 1987 to 1990, but particularly 1990, is because we had to collect, this was at the University of Maryland Department of Animal Science, and we had to collect fairly large samples of blood from the vena cava 1 inch from the heart with a 5 inch long needle plunged up to the hilt in a blind target spot.
And that was pigs, right?
Right,
Yeah.
pigs. And it's a federal law. They have to be a monitor for brucellosis and pseudorabies. But the critical thing for us was that if the pig moves and causes you to nick the vagus nerve, it can be fatal to them on the spot. There's nothing, you don't have time to do anything. So we did not want these pigs to experience uncertainty or frustration.
Because
So
that would cause movement. Sure.
exactly. And so we taught them, we set up the targets, and then X, 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 X. And we developed that, we honed it further because it turns out that that worked like a charm. But when it is accelerated, it works even better. So it turned into X, 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 X. And you can use other
Mhm.
sounds. You can use a sound like g g g g g g or ki 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 or d d d d d d
Yeah.
d.
I usually use D D D D D D D D D D D D D D. Yeah.
Yeah, they all work
Yeah.
really well. There's a few that I
It
don't.
doesn't part of what I explain to people is it doesn't sound like other types of words that we use. It's a unique sound in their world.
And the rhythm of it
Yeah.
communicates, like, once we recommend teaching two different ones. They do have slightly different specialties, so to speak. But once you do two, you could switch to anything and the animal gets it from context. So, something that your readers might get a kick out of is we actually counted the speed of my intermediate bridges, which just developed, as I'm observing the animals and I'm honing in to try to be the most effective I can be. I had no idea that I always did it at a certain speed. One of our trainers is a sound engineer. So he took these recordings and counted the speed of them. And out of all things, the speed was 7.82 to 7.83 beats a minute. So you've got this animal that's all calm and there's no needle in there yet or anything like that. And we want to keep them in that calm state. So the intermediate bridge can anchor the animal into that calm state as you go forward into the slightly less certain states. If you go to my YouTube channel and Google blood collection,
We'll
you can,
have things like this in the show notes too. So
okay, great.
yeah.
Because you can actually see this. You can see one pig where the blood was collected the way that they had done it for years, overseen. In fact, there's two vets right there doing the whole thing. And then it goes to the way we taught the animals, and it's going to look like this pig is being lured because the trainer, it has a bottle of flat orange soda, which I thought was just like the key to pigs everywhere. And it's not. It turns out it came from their soda machine, and they would not drink everything in the can. It would go flat, and then they'd give it to the pigs. And the pigs were like, yes. And they love that flat orange soda. So you see this container is full of this flat orange soda, and the pig is kind of sucking on it, and the tech is plunging the needle up to the hilt, and she doesn't even care. And he's pulling the needle back. He collects all the blood, and people assume that he's got her there because he's essentially luring her to the soda. Watch that soda level. It does not change. He doesn't want her swallowing. He is not giving her anything yet. And she's going to get it at the end. She's optimistic and hopeful,
Mhm.
but that is not how they were trained. The only reason it's set up that way is because he's trying to be as efficient as possible. So he combines his target with also the payoff, but the payoff isn't going to happen until after the whole thing is over because of the danger of nicking the nerve. Now, another thing that came up with that is, what would you think the problem would be in trying to train a dog? So what would be analogous?
I think one of the ones that as groomers we see most often is when we're talking about things that an animal is likely to find uncomfortable, and that's drying their head.
Oh, okay.
It involves noise. It involves airflow near eyes and noses and ears. It's definitely one of those sticking points. But if you can teach an animal to be still, you can get things done faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long would you imagine it would take to teach an animal to cooperate with head drawing? If you weren't going to groom it, but you were going to teach it for a groomer, like, what do you think the quickest you could do that would be?
I'm having trouble answering that because there are so many different components to first you have to figure out why what this individual thinks is challenging about that process, because some
Mm.
animals are like, yeah, sure, dry my head, um
Yeah, right.
so
There's
first
always that.
yeah, so first step is to figure out why, and also to figure out if there's a physical reason, because sometimes there's a physical reason that they're uncomfortable before we even start drying.
Yeah, great observation. So let's go back to the simpler thing
Mm.
of collecting blood from the pig. Do you have an idea of how long, like if you had to teach a dog to do that particular thing, how much time would you allot? Let's say you had a big vet exam coming up and you needed to have that training done. Do you have any concept of how long it would take you to get that behavior on voluntary cue?
I think I would probably work on it for 5 or 10 minutes a day for a couple days and see where we're going. Like
Okay.
not super long, not like drill them for an hour. It would depend. Yeah.
So,
Keeping in mind, part of drying heads is also the endurance run.
so to go from beginning to end, like I like your approach,
Mhm.
how far out would you want to start that training to be sure you had it done in time?
If I had to say, like, okay, can you give me 3 days to work on this? Like if there was something that I knew had a procedure my pets needed to go through, if I said like, okay, can you give me 3 days to work on this? I think I'd be pretty comfortable that I could teach my own guys, the dogs I live with, to be able to handle that in 3 days.
A needle to the vena cava?
I think so.
Okay, interesting. In
But
this
these are
case,
my guys, though.
yeah,
Different than
because
dogs or I don't
yeah, I
know.
would say, but I thought it was amazing what these guys accomplish 1 hour per animal on average.
Yeah, that's crazy, huh?
Broken up into short training sessions 3 to 4 times a week for 2.5
Mhm.
weeks. And the big problem that they had was nothing related to stress or pain or anything like that. It's that the animals, we change their perception, and that's why we call this process perception modification. So the pigs that were afraid to do this initially wanted to be first. So we had to take the time to teach each pig his own name and to wait till he was called. And if you watch that video, look behind the tech as he's collecting the blood from the first pig, you're going to see a little pig standing right behind him. You can see his ear over Benny's shoulder. That pig is politely waiting his turn.
And I
And
think that it's interesting because, one of the you would think it would be an advantage that dogs are around people so often and have these very rich lives, but in some ways it's a disadvantage. For the pigs, that might have been their highlight. Like, that's the most interesting thing happening in their world.
yeah, it's possible.
Possible, right? Like, "Ooh,
It's
this is
totally
novel
possible.
and interesting," and in a way that they don't always have novel and interesting, yet so many of our dogs do.
Yeah, and these particular guys were great with the animals. For example, the reason they started doing this is they didn't like the stress they saw with the way that they had initially done it. And they came to me and said, "Could we make this better?" And when I saw the way it had been done, and I saw the stress involved in that, I was like, I thought there's no way. And then, but we would start like such and such. And it turns out it really wasn't a big deal when you approach it differently. And so you talk about with your dogs, you brought your dogs up learning about their body parts and cooperating and being respected and so on. But I've gotten a little bit far afield because we were talking about why would you want to train this way?
Mhm.
And we said, first of all, safety, and
Yeah.
then your quality of life. And the dog's quality of life is very important. But we're going to give you first consideration on this. And just imagine if you had to collect blood from a pig by snaring it and restraining it, and it took 3 adults to do the procedure, and the pig was all upset, and all the babies were upset. When these animals are upset, they produce these stress byproducts that are literally toxic. They
Mhm.
travel through the air. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when a dog is panting, it can become very difficult to breathe and the air can smell not good.
Those ads about stress sweat smells different.
Yeah.
I can smell the difference with stress panting.
Yeah.
Like, when a dog is panting because they're stressed versus panting because they're excited or tired, you know?
Yeah.
It does smell different.
And neuroscientists have pointed out that they travel these chemicals or these biological products travel right through your skin, right into your lungs, and it is literally contagious. And
Interesting.
anybody that's handled an animal that's really stressed can verify this. There are animals where you go into a situation that's like, whoa, I'm not upset, they're upset. And I feel
Yeah.
that right here, like between my throat and my heart. And it's just like heavy, very, very dense.
Well, and to mention something else there too, when you were talking about, with working with the pigs, one of the things that I point out a lot on this show is that in somehow we got away from this with dogs, but any other animal we work with, and I haven't worked with, well, I haven't worked with zoo animals, but I've worked with, birds and snakes and some reptiles, as well as dogs, cats, horses, farm
Hmm.
animals. I went to an agricultural high school. It's just common sense expert animal handling if an animal is scared to calm them down.
Yeah.
And so for us to be thinking about, like with our dogs, that's just expert level animal handling. Don't worry about who's winning or who's not winning. Think this animal is struggling and having a hard time, and I need to help them be
And
okay with this.
sometimes the biggest, fiercest are struggling the most.
Yeah.
You know, as a person that worked with huge animals, it's like they're all delicate. So when you use this incredible mental capacity that these animals have that we often ignore, we tend to project on the animals, oh, he doesn't speak, so he doesn't have any vocabulary,
Right.
and not watching to see what does this animal respond to. If I tell him what's going to happen, does he get ready to cooperate with me on that? So we can make our future with that animal so much easier by just teaching him about the process of grooming.
Hmm.
These are your body parts. These are the different kinds of touch. These are the different kinds of instruments and the substances like shampoos and alcohols and whatever. These
Loud noise. I
are
name
the
loud
noises.
noises. Yeah, I let them
Other
know the
animals,
tools and show them, let them know what's happening next. Yep,
actions like picking you up. Are you ready? Pick up. Good, 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 good.
yep,
Good. That's
yep.
pick up.
Or even before that, reach around you. Gotta reach
Yeah.
around you because we have to reach around to be able to pick up. Can I reach for you? Can I reach around you?
That and what you
D
just
D
said
D D
is
D
a
D D D.
really good habit. Can I reach around you? Tell me when you're ready. Ask permission. They will give you permission. Do not rush them. I was in a vet's office and the dog required a muzzle. So they were like, oh no, that we'll just try. No, get the muzzle. They put the muzzle on, and the tech just reaches out and grabs the dog. Doesn't tell me even that they're going to do it. And the dog was no idiot. He just reaches out and raked his claws right down her arm like the hell you will. And she backed down, which, this was something that was really of her creating because she acted like the animal was a bag of potatoes. He's
Yeah.
got his own opinion. We need to get in there and negotiate, and it really doesn't take very much time.
Well, and
So,
I try to remind groomers too, a dog of any size can hurt you. A
yeah,
dog of any size or cat or whatever animal can make themselves totally untouchable. And if you were able to put a muzzle on, it's because that animal let you,
yeah, you a really good
you know?
perspective.
And so they let you, and please don't betray that trust if they let you.
To take away that gift from the dog, the fact that they, like you said, let you do it, and to dishonor that, that's one of those things that leaves a feeling with an animal. And we just don't need to do that. We just don't need to. You can just be polite
Yeah.
and just say, here's what I want to do. And you look, you're such a good dog and everything. Is it all right with you? Yeah, and you don't have to use this many words. Here's what it actually sounds like when I do it. I want to touch your head. Tell me when you're ready. Good, 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 good. And that's me landing on the head. I need to cut your nails. I'm going to twist your nail. This is twisting your nail. These are the clippers. This is what I'm going to use. Okay. Tell me when you're ready. Good, 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 good. So it's really simple. You don't have to, read the manual on how to clip nails to the
Right.
dog, but you do want to show them everything. And it's so important to let them see and feel and experience the equipment.
Well, and one of the things I want to point out here, because I know there are groomers and probably some owners too, because I know that some owners listen to this show too, um, that are probably thinking like, but what if he doesn't stay still? And that's where I'm like, hey, are you ready? I'm gonna reach for you. Oh, you weren't ready. I just
Right.
stopped. Oh, you're not ready. Okay. Do you want to try again? Let's try again. I'm going to reach for you. D D D D D D D D D D D D. Good. Or if they're not ready, like, oh, not ready. So I'm going to reach for you. D D D. Oh, not ready. Okay. Do you want
Yeah.
me to try something different? Can I reach for your shoulder? instead of wherever I was reaching before, go back to a spot that they're comfortable with because they aren't always going to be ready. But that doesn't necessarily mean a refusal. It means not ready.
And what you've just done is defuse things, because if they're worried that you're going to escalate all of a sudden, it's like you just showed them, no, I'm not going to all of a sudden wrestle you down.
Right, right. Well, and they learn that, oh, I can give a really subtle cue and you listen to me. So I don't need to use my teeth
Yeah.
or my claws or any other big exaggerated displays of leave me
Yeah.
alone. That subtle cues and like, oh, this human listens. Which is why sometimes I have people like owners saying, why is he so good for you when he isn't like this for us? And I'm like, well, let me show you why.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And that's the intelligence of the animal again. It's like there's a conversation there. And one of the things about conversation is there's two people speaking.
Mm,
And you ask the dog a question, are you ready? You need to wait for the answer. You need to
right.
wait for them. You'll see their eyes go left to right, and then they'll kind of look inward like, "Oh yeah, okay, I can do it. I can just get quiet." And like you, every once in a while, the dog will say, "I'm not ready."
Not ready. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Nope. Hard
I
pass, lady. Try something easier.
yeah, and so I would encourage groomers to offer service that's like pre-grooming, where you take the dog in and just acquaint them with everything and get to know them a little bit and so on. And they have a relatively unstressful thing where they learn about everything. They start to form a connection with you. If they've had a bad experience with grooming, it's not like that with you.
Yeah. We often
Get
refer
paid
to those
for
as
it.
meat and treats.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Meat and treats. Yep. We tend to do that a lot with puppies, but I encourage people to assume that if you're meeting a dog for the first time, we
Yeah,
should assume that they're going to have some difficulty with it and just be pleasantly surprised if they find it easy. Because
yeah,
what we
that's a
do
good
is
way to go.
really yeah, what we do is really odd. We touch them with all over with weird stuff and things, and
And
they
they're
don't
like, "Do you
know.
have a license?"
I know, right? And
Like,
and
"You're
a
back
lot of our
there."
dogs aren't well prepared for it.
No,
So
they're
we
not.
should assume that they're not well prepared.
A
And
lot
a
of
couple
owners
of
can't touch their dogs behind the ribs.
yeah, yeah,
And then you, a stranger, the dog's gonna go, "Oh, yeah, it's okay if you go there." It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
not
Or
how it
or
works.
dogs that aren't comfortable with strangers at all, but the owner doesn't think twice about bringing them into a room full of strangers and expecting us to, like, that hair next to their lip, you know?
Yeah,
And and the dog's not well prepared for that.
yeah. I absolutely agree with that, and this is where, having some understanding and some respect for the dog is gonna really stand you in good stead. With exotic animals, having that respect can save your life. Because then when you make the mistake, like step on their foot or something like that, they already know that this is not on purpose. You would not purposely inflict pain or do something like that. And they give you the benefit of the doubt. So
Yeah,
I
they look
always,
up at you like, "Clumsy, you okay over there?
yeah, yeah, really. And
Did
that
you know
goes
you
both,
just stepped on my foot?"
it goes both ways as well. If you see the dog accidentally do something, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt also. There was a time that I was walking out of my gray seal exhibit, and this gray seal was just yawning. And when she yawned, I was walking by at the same time, and her teeth grazed on my hand. And she she turns away and she's gagging. And I was like, "Oh man, I know you didn't mean that and you are fine." She's gagging because these animals are built to grab food. And when something lands on their mouth, it takes everything they've got not to grab it. And she did not want to bite me, but I knew that that wasn't her fault. She wasn't being sloppy, like, "Oh, I'll act like I'm just yawning and maybe I could bite Casey's hand." It was not that at all. And it's like, I see who you are. You are a responsible, outstanding colleague. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna
So,
throw in there that I think sometimes groomers, well, in the dog world in general, thinks, "Wow, I'm glad that dog missed. He
mm,
tried to bite me and he missed." It is a huge amount of self-control to
yes.
do a fast grab and not make contact and not do damage. Dogs very rarely miss. What they were doing was trying to communicate to you, like, "I am accelerating my warnings," but it's not a miss.
Yeah, I'm really serious. Please don't do this. This really
Mhm.
bothers me.
Yeah.
And Orca trainers have said that people really underestimate the amount of cooperation and everything that was done. So people have been robbed in the later years because, against all reason, trainers were taken out of the water. Trainers that work with orcas were taken out of the water. And the safety of being an orca trainer is greater than the safety of commuting to work to be an orca trainer. And in spite of only one situation in over 40 years, everything was closed down. And the trainers used to tell me that just the strength and the size of an orca swimming through the water was such that it would be like sleeping with a baby, where you had to be constantly vigilant about everything where your body was so that you did not hurt that baby. And that for them to safely be in the water with these orcas was constant, not just cooperation, but facilitation by the orcas. So when you realize that, yes, there can always be a mistake. Look at, working with humans. Most of the people know the person that murders them.
Yeah.
So you can be friends and things can still go wrong, but
Yeah.
they don't go wrong very often, at least with orcas. And there's just so much, they're taking care of you. You
Mhm.
can see it in so many, you know, ways that they interact with us. If your listeners are interested in other animals and ways that they show this, a wonderful person to look at on Facebook is I think it's Walking with Elephants,
Ooh.
but her name is Lauren Murphy, and she's an elephant trainer and a circus person. And she has all these videos of her being cuddled by her elephant. And she's very aware that, an elephant can easily kill you, even inadvertently.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she even talks about how loved she feels when she's with her elephant. So it's really just an intense thing to realize that this trust that starts out, we're trying to get to know this animal, maybe we'd like to be friends. As a groomer,
Mhm.
it starts out more about I need to get this service done for the dog and the client, but it can quickly develop into such a rich and wonderful relationship where instead of pressure and stress, it's just wonderful to see these animals again, and it's a dance. You just kind of flow through the whole process and everybody understands one another. It's a great way to be with animals.
It really is.
So the
Really is.
second thing was your life as it's going to be. A third thing is efficiency.
Mhm.
When you take
Yeah.
a little bit of time to teach the animal the process, you're going to find that they totally cooperate. My horse, when I have to put her halter on, she comes in, she turns this way so I can put it over the top of her head. And then she turns this way so I can fasten the cheek. And with the farrier who's going to do her hooves, she looks and she sees where is he going. She picks that foot up. He doesn't have to ask her.
Yep.
She knows what he's trying to do for her. And something that I'll bet you guys do all the time, and if you don't, um, maybe consider it. The farrier and the horse dentist and the person that does the massage on my horse will all do a little bit and then step back and ask the horse, how is that?
Mm, okay.
And the
Interesting.
first time she got her teeth filed, because that's a deal on horses,
Mhm.
the dentist is Jeff Tucker. He's a horse dentist specialist down in Florida. And he travels all over the country to do this. He didn't use any kind of sedative or anesthesia or anything else. He didn't use any kind of restraint. There are horse dentists that will put a halter on the horse's head and put it up over a rafter in the barn so the horse can't move his head more than, a certain amount up and down. All this kind of stuff. They use a speculum that straps the mouth shut, just all kinds of things like that. He goes in, he puts the file in, does just a little bit of filing on that edge that will cut into the horse's cheek, takes the file out, and just says to the horse, see how that is.
Mhm.
He then turned around to talk to, there were 3 owners there, to explain to us what he was doing. And my horse goes like this, and she feels it for a minute. And then she comes over and he's still talking to us. And all of a sudden she takes her muzzle and nudges his hand like, okay, finish my teeth. They can wait, finish my teeth. And he's a great horseman. And he turns around and goes, I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. Let's do it.
Well,
Right?
and I noticed something like that with dogs, that if you brush out a mat, the couple of brush strokes after that mat is gone feel good. So like don't just brush out a tangle, and of course gentle brushing. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But but gentle brushing, but you brush out a tangle. That tangle has been pulling on skin unevenly. It's sort of like a ponytail that's got
Yeah.
twisted around and you slept in it, and like it's really uncomfortable. And you get that out and run the brush through a couple times, and the animals are usually like, "Oh, dang, that feels nice."
And
Give them
especially,
the moment to think that
yeah.
feels nice
And
before you
put
move
their
on.
attention on it.
Yeah, like, doesn't that
So
feel good now? And they're like, "Oh, yeah."
exactly. And give them a moment to make those decisions. Don't just
Mm.
rush them past it, because it's so helpful when they see, oh, this is for my benefit also.
Yeah, yeah, and it could just be one little section of mat instead of trying to demat everything and then, like, see at the end of the day, that was all fine, wasn't it? But, like, in that moment, because this moment matters, which is something I say a lot on this
Yeah.
show, like, this moment matters. Brush one little section out and then see how good it feels that the brush can go through, and they're like, "Oh, there's purpose." It's really hard to help them understand the purpose if we just keep going. Like, give them the chance.
So, Chrissy,
Yeah.
is it realistic with groomers for, let's say, you don't take the dog out and put him on the table, you take him out of the crate and you just do a little bit of brushing and you say, okay, think about that for a minute, put him back in the crate. Like you don't do, because there's setup time involved with getting them up on the crate and everything. But there's some things like hair brushing
Mhm.
that might be well approached in little cycles.
So, it will depend. So, what I do, because I'm house call groomer, which
Mhm.
means that I really any sort of break that I give them, would mean that I'm not grooming, right? But there are
Right.
so many things to do, and usually a dog isn't worried about all of them. So I can circle back repeatedly and go, so instead of, if they're really great for, and this is more for the listeners, but if they're really great for like running clippers over their body, I'm not going to do that in one fell swoop, because that's what I'm going to go back to in between things that were more challenging.
That's a great idea. So you're letting the dog relax in
Give
between.
them a chance, go back to something they're comfortable with while they relax and think about whatever the challenge had been. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because in perception modification, we do everything in cycles. And we start out with really small pieces of accomplishment, and we always put rest in between them. And during the rest, we talk to the animal about Here's what you just accomplished. You did
Mhm.
a really good job. You stayed calm. You're gaining your chops in doing this. You're gonna just blow it away. Good dog. Okay, tell me when you're ready. We'll do it again.
Yeah. And
And what
so during that break for a dog groomer, it could be like if I'm working in a salon environment, I might plan on being able to put that dog back in a crate and take them out again at intervals or
okay.
in somebody's home. If I'm really stepping away from my role as groomer and doing more training with them, which a lot of my listeners do, but that is kind of breaking away from my role as groomer. But to say
Yeah.
like, "Okay, we are gonna take some of these breaks, and I'm gonna talk to you, Mr. Smith," or whatever, like, in between, and then we're gonna do another repetition. But, the thing is that groomers are taught to do things in an order because that makes you very efficient, and in
Right.
many ways, that's really beneficial for the animal, unless that animal isn't ready for the endurance run. So if they're worried about heads, don't wait till the end to do the head start to finish.
Yeah.
You know, even though that is a really efficient way to do things, that to have your system, because I know the dogs I groom are like, she did my right front foot. So now I'm going to pick up my left front foot because I know
Yeah.
what comes next, and it's really great for them to be able to do that. But we have to break the mold if they're having difficulty.
Yeah. And you can go back toward that ideal. So,
Yeah.
as you gently let the animal learn about these different processes, and then he's not worried about them anymore, just like the pig.
Mm.
At the beginning, you might just do a little tiny bit. And at the end, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm ready. I want to be first. And we get that with dogs with doing their nails and so on. They started out not wanting to do their nails. And then they're like, oh, I'll do that. I'll be first. And
My
that's what
guys
we
wait for the other one to be done. I have two border collies at home, and if I'm doing nails on one, the other one's waiting their turn. I would like my nails done next. And I don't think either of them particularly love it, but it's like, nope, that's a thing we're gonna do. And
You
I'm
know,
willing.
it's a kind of a status thing I notice with horses at the stable. When your owner comes and does things with you, whether they're putting weird stuff on you, like a lot of these owners would dress their horses up in costumes for whatever the holiday was, and they go out and do art with their hooves and all kinds of weird things. And the horses would be, yeah, that's my owner.
Yep, yep. Well,
And
it's like bringing your parents to parents' night.
yeah, yeah, it
You
can
know?
be. And
Yeah.
it's like we noticed horses where their owners didn't come tended to go down in status.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so and it was enough compelling that with one of the horses, um, I started out I had to graze Sarah because Sarah had gotten ill, and this other horse, her owners didn't come very often, and she was a friend of Sarah's. So I asked the stable owner, "Can I let her graze when I take Sarah out?" "Yes." So the first time I go to take her out to graze, she just pulls right past me and goes like desperate to go eat this food. That's not how it happens. I go back, get her, put her back in the area, and then I tell her,
We walk
"I'm taking you
politely
out to
around here.
graze."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're a princess. Let's go. She never pulled the lead. That's unusual for an animal to correct themselves so completely. But she ended up doing all kinds of training with us and so on. Then the owner of the stable ended up taking ownership of her, like they worked it out with the previous owners that just didn't have time at that moment. She ended up being in special programs and all this. Her whole life came to a whole new place. Nobody was seeing how intelligent she was. Nobody was interacting with her. When she started getting interacted with, her whole nature changed, her whole standing in the group changed. It's very, very interesting.
Well, and I think with our dogs, we assume they all have the kind of life that our own dogs have.
Mm,
But as groomers, So dog trainers might have a blind spot. Dog trainers see dogs that the owners recognize that they have a problem and have taken at least one step toward fixing it. Dog groomers see people who bring in dogs that they're like, "Oh yeah, he doesn't let us touch him. He lives in the garage." You know what I
Like, isn't
mean? Like
that
that
normal?
that oh, well, but in their point of view, that's just super normal. "Oh, our dogs live in the garage or live chained in the yard." We don't get a lot of outdoor dogs here in New England because, I mean, unless they live in a barn as livestock guardians or something with other animals, it's just too cold in winter to be an outdoor dog here. But but the idea that, like, everybody's home life is kinda different, but there are a lot of things that people live with that I'm like, "Who lives like that?" Like, "Oh, if he's on the couch with a bone, we can't sit on the couch. He has a bone." I'm
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
so but they think nothing of bringing that dog to a groomer and expecting us to touch every little teeny tiny millimeter on that dog over and over and over again. Because
Yeah.
the grooming process is an endurance run.
Yes, it
You know?
is.
And if they're nervous about people reaching for them, what do we know about them, like, touching them?
And
Right?
an
You know?
indignity run.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like violation after violation. I will
Yeah.
now clean your eyes. I will now and it's like
I think I
you
counted about 20 foot touches before we even started trimming,
wow.
because you have to get the feet wet. So if they're worried about foot touches, I think I counted about 20 different versions and then multiply that by 4 feet. We're relentless. It's over and over. We're going to get you wet. We're going to scrub you with soap. We're going to work the soap in. We're going to get you wet and rinse that out and scrub that out. And we're going to put conditioner on and then we're going to rinse that out. And we're working in between your toes. And if it's
Wow.
one thing that they're worried about, we're circling back to that one area over and over and over again. As groomers, we can choose to decrease those repetitions, but it
Mm,
also means that we have to help an owner understand that your dog isn't well prepared for our services.
yeah.
We're not performing full services today, you
Yeah.
know?
Wow, that's huge. I know a lot of animals, it's a big journey for them to learn to tolerate water.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you how long do you normally find that takes you to like, what percentage of dogs react badly to water, and how long does it take in general to get them past it?
I think for the most part, the first couple times they're just a little bit unsure. Keeping in mind that most of our dogs, we're encouraging people to get them in as early as possible. Ideally, your puppy should have been bathed by the breeder before they were even old enough to go home. So they should be getting this done early. But if they're worried about the sound of the sprayer, not just the water, but the
Yeah,
sound of the sprayer, things like that, sometimes we're like, okay, well, we might get your head wet, but I don't think you're going to be able to handle soap and rinsing and all those other things.
right.
So we're going to work on getting your head wet today, but wash the rest of the body. And then we have the additional challenge where some of our owners have taught dogs to attack the garden hose because they think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
never
that'll
even
be an
thought
extra
about that.
$100. Yeah.
My husband may be guilty of that, okay?
Right? Yeah, because they're like, "Oh, it's so funny." Spray the hose and the dog's jumping around and biting at the water. And I'm like, "Oh, that's not good."
Well, I've worked a lot with dogs, and I'd worked with a lot with dogs before I got my dog, King the Wonder Dog, and I got him into the bathtub and had him all soaked up, and, he looked like the guy in the bubble bath commercial,
Yeah.
and I was just about to rinse him off, and he'd had all he could stand, and
Mm.
he exploded out of the bathtub, took down the bath curtains. Oh
Oh,
my gosh, it was
no.
such a mess. It didn't even occur to me that this dog wouldn't already know how to deal with water, and in his case, he repressed reacting to it, so I didn't see there was a problem at first
Yeah.
until there was really a problem. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
these are
And with shampoo on them is one of the very few times that a groomer has to say, like,
have
"Okay,
to
I
do it.
have to do this step." I
Yeah,
can choose to not put shampoo on if I see that a dog is having difficulty getting wet. I can decide to, like, "Okay, you're not ready because if I get you wet, then I have to continue." So I can choose to not get soap on you. And I know groomers out there, there's somebody, at least one person out there going, "But that's what they came for." not today. That's for the next 15 years of their life. If we
Yeah,
do it right
that
today,
is such a great
we're
attitude.
prepping those things for future. But if they have shampoo on them, we have to get that off because that's going to
Yeah,
cause itchy
so
skin. It's going to cause problems. And the other time that we have to be able to follow through no matter what is if they are injured and we need to do first aid.
yeah.
So, other anything else, we can be like, I got 2 toenails done today, and that's good enough,
And I wish I
and
had talked to somebody like you before I put that dog in the bathtub, because I'd done all this work with exotic animals and so on, and I knew about that. I just didn't expect somebody's pet dog to be like that. And so I
Yeah.
didn't ask enough questions. I didn't do that little bit of reflection like, okay, you're in the water. How is that? That good?
Yeah,
Are you good? Okay, you
yeah,
want to try it on your legs all the way up. Now it wouldn't even happen because I would do the feet and then
right.
I would do the bottoms of the legs and then I would do the, yeah, but it really got me back then.
Well, and that's the thing, there's a point when we're kind of like, if we make the assumption, "Well, this dog has been groomed before, maybe it's my first time grooming him, but he's been groomed before, so he's gonna know this." And I'm trying to get all of us to step back and say, "Let's meet this dog and find out."
Yeah, let them tell you
Yeah,
because it could have been very traumatic that he could have been fine before he
yeah,
got groomed
yeah.
last time.
Their last groomer might not have retired. And I'm like, "Did she though? Or was this somebody who was always struggling with this dog and they weren't making progress and decided for her own health and safety or his own health and safety to say, 'I'm not gonna continue grooming your dog.'" You
Yeah,
know?
and that's a better thing to do than to put yourself into a bad situation.
Yeah, because dogs can do serious, serious injuries to people. I'm trying to remember the statistics, but I think it was like a dog that's about 45 pounds is large enough to kill a human.
Oh.
I mean, you think about the mouth that could rip out your throat. Is it
Yeah,
likely?
and
No, but I mean, I know either of my border collies, if they would grabbed my throat and decided they were going to rip it out, they could.
yeah, you'd be gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical thing, and also nobody needs that trauma, and there's the wild card of your body in shock. So
Mm,
here's something you need to know. A little tiny dog that bites you, you can be in a situation where you're not even worried about it. You
yeah.
see the dog is coming to bite, and it still can put you in shock. So let me tell you how I
Mm,
know that. At National Zoo, I had 2 otters, Max and Emily, and sometimes people would do crazy things and throw things in the exhibit that would be dangerous to the animals. So one of the visitors reported this, and it was time for me to go. And so I run up there, and instead of going through the door like I normally would, I just vaulted into the exhibit, grabbed the problem, put it in my pocket, and now I was used to vaulting in and out of this exhibit all the time, but I actually hadn't been in there for about a year.
Oh.
So my vaulting out of the exhibit protocol was a little bit rusty. And as I'm on my way out, I see Emily, and she's like, "You didn't come in through the door. A real person comes in through the door." And she's coming after me. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to leave and we'll talk about it." And so I'm going out. Well, Emily from a flat foot little otter,
Mhm.
very, very short, and she leapt up and bit me on the ankle. And the reaction that my body had to her biting me, and it wasn't a severe bite or anything else. It was kind of like tag, and next time you'll be sorry. And the people that were there go, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Because apparently I just froze in mid leap.
Oh,
And
no.
then they steadied my elbows and I continued out and everything else. And I didn't bring Emily out on my leg or anything like that. Everything was fine. But it taught me a lesson because I wasn't worried about her biting me. I knew if she nipped me, she wasn't going to rip into me. We were friends and so on.
Mhm.
But I just irritated her to the point where she had to make it known. for whatever
Mhm.
reason. And that's when I saw how significant that transgression is to your body.
So part of that story, what made me think of that was relating to people that like that freeze, flight, or fight response. We do that too. And that to me sounds like the freeze
Everybody.
response, like the, "Oh," and your body just stops for a second and you're like startle response, like that kind of like, oh, what just happened?
Yeah,
And our dogs do that too. And sometimes they're doing that on the
absolutely.
table, but you don't get to pick which one you're going to do. Because sometimes people are like, well, he could have chose
Right.
to not fight. He could have done flight or freeze. I'm like, but you don't get to pick that. If a spider drops on my keyboard right now on my computer, my response is going to be a startle response. I'm not particularly afraid of spiders, but there are people who would run and there
Yeah.
are people who would smash their computer keyboards
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
feel terrible later, but like I burned my house down and there's no spider, you know? um, they, that,
Solve
that,
that problem.
yeah, you know, but those are just responses to something that
Yeah,
startled you,
and
that
this is
scared you.
such an important point because my father had been in Vietnam and he learned all this survival, hand-to-hand combat kind of training. And he came back and he wanted to make sure his three daughters were equipped for the world. So he taught us all these things. I know how to break somebody's kneecap and, choke them to death and all this other kind of stuff. Not really thinking I would have to use it,
Mm.
but my father tried to be very thorough. And I remember being out there, we had 16 acres, and he'd say, drop, roll, la, la, la. And we had to learn to fire guns. And we all became marksmen, not snipers, but marksmen.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I go out on my own and I waken one morning at 1:20. I had fallen asleep on the living room floor. And here is a man coming towards me in my apartment. And I remember thinking, he's in the perfect position for me to break his knee. I could not move.
Interesting.
I knew exactly what to do. I'd been tested on it. So your comment about you don't
Hmm.
get to choose your response.
Mm.
Now, I had also made a decision way back when, before I needed it, to always scream if I was in a problem. And I don't have a high voice, and I was afraid if I tried to scream like most women, no sound would come out. So I screamed really low, and that really saved me because the guy's literally trying to choke me and strangle me. And all of a sudden, he recoils in horror, going, "Oh my God, she's nuts." And
She's
he jumps
crazy.
up and runs away from me. So
Weird.
I knew the kitchen door stuck. And so I got up and went out the front door and ran up the apartment building stairs. And the guy on the third floor comes out, "Will you stop that caterwauling?" It didn't sound like I was screaming. It sounded like I was a foghorn. So I said, "Yeah, if you'll let me use your phone to call the police." "Yeah, come in." So I call the police and he hears me talking about this guy in my apartment. He's like, "Holy cow." Like I didn't look panicked
Right.
or anything like that. It's not that I was panicked and out of control. It's just that, like you said, I didn't get to choose my level of response. And there's a gentleman, and I don't remember his name, but he does survival videos on YouTube, and he's a retired Navy SEAL. And he talks about whatever you learn to do to protect yourself, you have to know that it better be simple.
Yeah.
Because when you get into a situation and you get some dopamine, the dopamine dulls your ability to think on the spot and it interferes with your motor coordination. So, just like me thinking I was going to break the guy's knee didn't quite work out that way because I hadn't practiced with dopamine.
Yeah. I know somebody who talks about self-defense and stuff and says you have to think about all of these scenarios because you're not going to know how to respond if you've never thought of it before.
That's
And
right.
you
You
don't
don't have
know how
time
you're
to
going to do
think
it.
in the moment.
Yep.
And that goes for
Yep.
grooming too, because it's
It
not like
does.
it's not like you're gonna have to karate chop a dog or break his knee, but rather how many ways could this go wrong?
Yep. You got to
And if
think
the
about all
dog's
of the ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
if he steps
Yep.
off the far end of the table, what am I gonna do? Because I can't reach him.
Yep. Or
And
the
if I
dog
do
that
reach
turns quick, am I confident that I'm not in range? Things
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So, we were talking about the reasons to do this training with dogs,
Mhm.
and so basically, it's gonna make life better for everyone.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
encouraging thing that I'd like to really make clear is in 2 minutes of visit, you would be amazed at how much you can accomplish. So with zoo trainers, ironically enough, they do some of what groomers do.
Yeah.
Like one of
Absolutely.
the keepers that worked with me had to clip little samples of hair, but still had to clip hair off of the polar bear. And she had to arrange for the polar bear to allow the vet to examine her mouth without anesthesia. So there's a lot of these kinds of behaviors or
Mhm.
behaviors that are maybe not about grooming, but similar in the
Yeah.
kinds of demands and the intrusion, like collecting milk from a sea lion using a breast pump
Yeah.
so that we could feed their babies if there was a problem, etc.
Yeah. And I
So,
think part of what makes grooming unique is that it's such a long drawn out relentless process. Vet
yeah,
visits are much easier than dog grooming, you know.
that's
But
a
if we
really
can
good
help
point.
but if we can help the animals be comfortable with it, we can set them up for 15 years of grooming
Good.
need. You
Yeah,
know? I mean, if we're assuming that dogs live to be about 15. So, and everybody hates it when I do this, but right now it's March of 2024 as we're recording this. That means in 2039, that dog is still gonna be comfortable with us grooming it.
yeah. And that's the
2039. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. I
You
hope
know,
we're still
right?
comfortable being
You
grooming.
know? And where were you 15 years ago? Right.
Right.
Now, think about a 15-year lifespan for an animal. If we can do that homework part, the prep work, which sometimes prep work feels tedious, but that's like the bathing and drying might feel tedious if what you really wanted to do was a fancy trim, but
Y
it's the foundation for everything we do, you
yeah.
know? The foundation for the house, the measuring and sawing wood before you actually get any sort of furniture, you know?
Well, and
There's foundation stuff that's super important.
all of life is 98% drudgery. So we might as well lean into that, and that's
Wow.
our meditation time.
That's harsh.
Well, even, working with exotic animals, it's like you've gotta clean them, 'em, you've gotta feed feed them. I used to process 450 pounds of fish every morning. That's not the high point in a marine mammal trainer's career.
Living the dream.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like like vacuuming a grooming shop, living the dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we have to find ways to enjoy that part of it. And with the
Mhm.
dogs, that could be when I play the music that's 432 hertz, 432 hertz. That's healing music and it's so relaxing. You said you use music.
I use the calming music for dogs. There's iCalm for pets. It used to be through a dog's ear, but they play around with tempo and the complexity of the music. Usually it's classical, but sometimes it's reggae. There are some other options. It puts me right to sleep. So I actually have a speaker with a little SIM card in it so that I can have that music playing and I can listen to something else on my Bluetooth because
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
puts me to sleep.
yeah. It's like
But
if
it's
you're the
harmless
driver.
and can really help.
Yeah. And um yeah, so as we learn these things about ourselves, like, you can't do that when you're working. You could do it if you have to soak your feet also, or you have to wait for your bread to rise or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And we listen to podcasts. I
Mhm.
listen to podcasts a lot and audible books and so on. And we can yeah, use this kind of stuff with the animals to an extent. We use a lot of gray noise with exotic animals, like polar bears. If they go into hibernation or torpor, as I think they call it,
Mhm.
if they get disturbed, they could get upset and eat their babies or kill their babies. And so one of the things that was often done preparing for a bear possibly having babies is to turn on a big fan.
Interesting.
So it kind of blunts any kind of sudden noises.
Well, I found this out by accident, but it's not always the sound of the dryers and the vacuums and stuff that the dogs are responding to as much as it's the distinction between quiet and loud, quiet, loud,
Ah, okay.
right? Or the airflow near heads or sensitive areas. But what
Yeah, so you
I
really have
found
to
out by
just
accident, yeah, because I left my clipper vac on at the end of a grooming, which so a clipper vac is a vacuum attachment for your clipper. So it automatically just feeds the hair into the vacuum as I'm clipping, right? But I would leave the clipper vac on while I was doing the final little detail work because owners wait until the clipper vac is turned off. So I was just doing it so that my owners weren't walking in, but the dogs are totally calm. The clipper vacuum is still on. They're
yeah.
just it's not on their body. They're like, "Whatever." And I think that there's an assumption that it's about the loudness of the noise, but I think it's going from quiet to loud, quiet to loud, quiet to loud.
And add that to the wind on their
Yep.
face or
Yep.
yeah, so that's great because if you do that, that's something you could do in cycles right from the beginning. Turn it on a little bit if the dog was new, turn
Yep.
it off, turn it on for a little bit longer, and you could be building that up, and it would just be incidental to the other things you were doing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'll often turn on the clipper vac or a dryer, if I'm going to grind nails, if they're a little bit nervous about that sound, because it totally changes the sound of the grinder.
Yeah. Do
So
you
it doesn't make it as obnoxious, I guess.
Yeah, because I was just gonna say there's something about grinding sounds that seem to be particularly challenging for dogs. And I've found that dogs are very reactive to sounds from air brakes on trucks
Mhm.
and also to the wheels on skateboards, roller blades, and often airport luggage.
Yeah, they hear some sounds that are higher than what we can perceive. And so if they're starting to respond to something, I'm like, hmm. And I've noticed with different dryers and because different dryers will have different sounds, right? The higher pitch ones irritate me. So I'm usually looking for something with a little bit of a deeper kind of noise to it. Um, but I definitely notice a difference if I turn on a dryer with a higher pitch.
Is that harder for the dogs?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Yep. Lower tones, in my experience anyway, don't get the same reaction as like a higher pitch one. And for groomers out there who remember when the high velocity dryers first came out in the late 80s and it was the Metro, the orange Metro that had that screechy kind of sound. I think that's why so many of us like switched to other types of dryers pretty quickly. There was
Wow.
one that had like a really kind of high pitch to it that I can't tolerate very well either.
And even if we can't hear it, it can
Mm.
still become very, very irritating to people.
Yeah, yeah.
So the dogs, it could be worse. My
Mm.
husband is an explosive sneezer. He doesn't do it on purpose, but he'll just like, "Arr!" And it's not just startling, it literally hurts my ear.
Mm.
And so I really kind of have some empathy for the dogs. All this talking about exotic animals and so on, I am not and never have been a groomer. But when I was 12 and 13 years old, I showed dogs for a professional trainer. And
Oh,
I showed
nice.
them in conformation and also in obedience. And I did the clipping for a bunch of Irish setters.
Oh, nice.
I never did any
They're a fun breed.
yeah, these dogs were all trained.
Mhm.
We had a club and there were 23 dogs in the club and they were amazing. And it wasn't until I left that club that I saw that Irish setters are often unsettled and, seem very flibberty-gibbet and so on, but these were not that way.
Liberty gibbet, that's a word I haven't heard in a long time.
But we
Love
had
it.
to
Great
y
word.
for them, you have to trim in between the toes
Yeah,
and all the
yeah.
hair that comes down and the whiskers and the line under in the tuck.
Mhm,
So it wasn't just that we had it's not a dog that gets a lot of grooming,
mhm,
but there's some thinning of the hair to really show the shape of the head. So there was
mhm.
some finesse on it. So I just wanted to say I do identify with you guys to extent. I know just enough to have seen the kinds of, uncertainties that can come up in the dog and how exacting it can be. And I'm glad I didn't have to do one of those poodles with a rainbow painting on it or something like that. Yeah. I
But,
can't even.
those dogs that are doing the creative, that get the painting and stuff on them, those are the dogs who are like, "I love being groomed." Because you don't try something on that like that for a dog who doesn't enjoy being groomed.
Yeah, and there
Those
are
dogs are
ambassadors.
magical.
Yeah, I think some of these dogs just like love the response they get from the public.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
like, "Yes, and I also have rhinestones on my fingers." Yeah.
Well, this weekend for a flyball tournament for St. Patrick's Day, my guys have green tails. Yeah. So I was like, "Oh, we got green just on the end of our tail. It's looking all cute." My mom asked me, she's like, "Well, there's still some white there. Can you make some like cute little dots and stuff and make them Easter egg tails for Easter?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, like I have the connections.
Yes,
So, what
fun
do you
stuff to
use
do.
to do that? Is it like chalk or dye or what do you use?
They're called blow pens. It's supposed to be washable. I mean, it's gonna stain a little bit, but you should be able to wash it out. It's semi-permanent stuff, but it's a blow pen, so you blow on it and it blows some ink on there, and I used a paper towel and just kinda dabbed it in.
That's so funny. I could
Yeah,
just
it's
see
kinda
me
fun.
doing pink on my dog's tail and him probably change his attitude.
So, will you remember Isa,
Yes.
the dog that I had when we first met, who was very, very shy? She liked people, but she didn't understand why people would wanna come over and talk to her or touch her or anything. She's like I remember a couple of times stepping in between her and somebody saying like, "If you need a hug, I'll give you a hug," but, like,
Yeah.
she's really not into that, "Leave her
Yeah.
alone," you know? Like,
And
"You're
I
a little
have to
needy."
protect her. That's how
No.
uninto it she is.
Yeah, but, I did her tail light pink at one point, and people would come over and like, "Oh, well, oh, her tail is pink." It actually slowed them down. She loved it. Yeah,
Interesting because
because it
she
wasn't,
got
like,
that
bright,
friendly.
vibrant, it was, like, pastel and she was a Disney princess of a border collie anyway, like, "Oh, hi,"
Yeah, yeah.
with her little pastel tail, and I did a pastel, like, lavender once, and people would instead of being rushing toward her, would slow down.
And kind
Interesting,
of
right?
be in awe instead of. I think
Yeah,
it's crazy
yeah.
that anybody thinks it's okay to come running up and touch your dog. It's
Yeah,
like, wow. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think they'd like it if you did that with their significant other. For some reason, they think dogs just don't have any sense
It's
of.
like, do you know humans who don't like being hugged?
Yeah, especially by people they've never even seen.
Okay, so the guy at Walmart in line behind you just wants to hug you and sniff your ears. What? Don't make it weird, lady, you know? So
Don't you like dogs? Aren't you friendly?
I wouldn't necessarily say you should color a dog's tail if they're shy. Like the bright colors and stuff definitely drive people to like little kids, but the super pastel tail, it slowed people down. And she was like, this is, I
Interesting.
am meeting new people who are so polite.
Well, that energy that's coming off those people, she's gonna,
Yeah. She's
"Ooh,
like,
I'm special."
people are so polite lately. My mom
That
hasn't had to step in between us at all.
I love that, and that's kind of like what I was saying about the horses, they get put into costumes.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we had said we would talk about how to do
How to teach the bridges.
bridges.
Yeah.
You let
Let's
me
do it.
know when we're at that point.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody, when we say this can be easy and fast, I'm serious. And I'm going to give you 6 steps to teach the terminal and the intermediate bridge. The terminal bridge tells the animal, you did it. You did it right.
Completed. Completed. Yes.
Yes. And the intermediate bridge says, you are on the correct path. If you continue, you're going to hit the terminal bridge. And to teach these, it's just 3 trials, 3 for the terminal bridge and 3 for the intermediate bridge. So what it looks like is you just put the food right in front of the animal's mouth, saying X, not X when you have your hand back by your shoulder, but X as you place it right by the animal's nose. You're going to do that 3 times.
Or D or whatever word you're
Yeah,
sound you're
whichever,
using. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
whatever
Or G.
word
G,
you
g,
choose.
g, g. Yeah.
And then for the next 3 trials, you're going to put your right hand with you if you're right-handed and that's what you put the food in, you're going to put it behind your back because you are already conditioned to stick your hand out there and go X. But now we're going to teach the intermediate bridge that leads to the X. So we start out by saying X and the animal looks toward us. And as right after we say X, we say X, 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 X. As we then place that little piece of food right in the animal's mouth. We do that 3 times. That's it.
And for people who are just listening and not able to see that, there's probably some video, but we'll see what we can link to in the show
Yeah.
notes. But you're starting off with that hand behind your back, and this is the XXX part is about movement. It's about movement. You know,
Yes.
like okay, now you're moving your hand toward and they're moving toward you.
And they have to wait for that hand with the food to get there. And
Yeah.
so the intermediate bridge is marking that interval. And so this is something that's so useful for groomers because you can support that animal through that duration, that endurance task that you're doing. And you don't have to do it nonstop. You can do it for a while and then stop. And then maybe you see the animal get a little apprehensive or a little tired or tense, and you can bring it right back in there. There's no cost.
Mhm.
And then you can drop it again as soon as you want. And there's one other thing that I want to mention about bridging. And I've bridged all different kinds of animals in all different kinds of situations. I always use a verbal bridge if I possibly can. And the reason is I don't have to use a hand for it. It doesn't break. It doesn't get covered with fish scales. I can't forget it. It doesn't cost me any money.
Mm.
But most importantly, I can modulate it. So I already mentioned we do approximately 8 or 7.83, right in there, bridges per second.
Mhm.
That's more precision than a clicker. A clicker is a compound sound. It goes click, click.
Mhm.
And you can only go through 3 of those in a second. So I can mark 8 instances in the time you could mark 3 instances. So I'm going to be able to have more precision. Also, I can modulate that bridge to give more support. So let's say something started to go wrong while you were, I don't know, your vacuum clipper,
Okay. Yeah.
maybe sucking the dog too much and, I don't know what, but anyway. And when you see the dogs getting just a little bit of tension or things are starting to go wrong, good, 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 good.
Well, and I can give you an example. Maybe you're working and there's another distraction that happens in the room.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you're doing really well here, buddy, but I'm gonna jump in with D D D D D D D D D D D D D D D, like being really excited and really bringing it to the tension that
Yep.
I recognize that you are trying really hard while someone just walked
Yeah.
past with like cookies and balls and like whatever craziness happens,
Yeah,
you know, like whatever distraction level just happened
a
near
tiger,
you.
right?
Yeah,
Walk
yeah.
by with a tiger.
I'm
Yeah,
a house call groomer, so it could be like FedEx and the mailman and like
yeah,
the school bus and everything all at once. So that's one of the times that I do that is like, look at you holding it together and I see you and I'm excited about it. You're
yeah.
doing
Getting
great.
getting in there at that moment of decision or that moment of try, where the animal's a little uncertain about where do I go from here, and you're like, you are on the right track. Great. They can just relax and lean into the direction you're guiding them to.
Yeah.
So don't think that a bridge is just for telling the animal, you did a great job, we're done. A bridge is to communicate to the animal that he is in process and doing what he needs to do. And you can do that off and on throughout the entire hours of
Hmm.
this. When you use a bridge this way, you don't even have to feed every time. Not at all. You
Yeah.
can just use some praise, you can use some tactile, and just tell the dog, "You did that so well. You are amazing. Can you do it again?"
Yeah.
And so,
We can use lots of other types of rewards. And I mean, I don't know how, I know I haven't talked much about clicker training on the show. So
uh-huh,
I don't know how much my audience knows about clicker training. So
right.
comparing and contrasting isn't really too
Well,
helpful for the most part. But the
it's
idea that we're telling the animal how well they're doing and when they've completed something, and that alone has value. That alone is reinforcing. That alone is before we even need to like have balls or cookies or anything like that,
yeah,
which is actually not necessarily a good idea in a grooming shop environment. A
yeah.
lot of shops don't even allow cookies. So to have
Yeah, there's a
something
lot of
else.
dogs that have allergies and so on that it could be
Yeah.
really bad.
Well, it can also affect every other dog in the room. So, like, so just keep in mind this is an option if you can't even use cookies, but dogs like hearing that they're doing it right.
Yeah, they do, just
They
like
do.
we do.
Yeah.
And, another thing, so I was showing my trainer perspective because when it comes to using markers, there's been a lot of talk about, "Oh, a clicker is more precise. A clicker is better because it's mechanical and it's always the same." If you're communicating with an animal, if the clicker is one or the clicker or the intermediate bridge is one of your words that you're using, just think, if I were going to tell you how to do something with training, does it make it better for you if every sound is the same?
Great job, Casey.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah, right.
just
Great job, Casey. Or even if it's a super excited, "It's great." We'd all be like, "Oh my god, if I hear that one more time."
yeah. Yeah, so it's like, as long as the communication is appropriate, it isn't better to make it so simplistic. It's better to use the option to support that dog as effectively as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't
Yeah.
be afraid of markers. Will you look nuts? Maybe.
If I'm working in somebody's home, like a house call groomer, and I don't want to explain the whole thing to them, I just start using good, 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 good. So I
Because
use good, 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 good as
yeah,
my intermediate and then followed by good. And they're like, oh, because they don't ask questions about that. They're like, oh, she's
yeah,
telling him
because it
he's
makes
good.
sense to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that one if I want to be like low key, just slide under the radar and continue to do my thing without interruption.
And we've got one person that likes the sound "chi" because she
See?
goes "chi, chi, 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 chi," and
Oh,
nobody
okay.
sees her lips moving.
Yeah.
But when you come right down to it, if you're trying to safely and effectively and kindly groom as many dogs a day as possible, you're not gonna care what anybody else there in your office thinks about you or in your salon. You're gonna be delighted if you can make more money in less time with less stress and have happier clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I initially thought I wanted to be a vet until I saw what a vet's workday was.
Mm.
And the vet encountered so many animals that were afraid of going to the vet. And all they want to do is help animals. That's why they're doing this. There's also a lot of repetition. And it's like you have to find ways to enjoy your job and make it so that you can go to this job and do the same thing over and over and over again. And one of the things that makes that so much nicer and easier is when the animal recognizes that you're doing something for them and they appreciate that. And that takes some education for them. And
Yeah.
Chrissy, you have in the past described it as you go to the doctor not because you love it, you subject yourself to discomfort because you're convinced it's in your own best interest. And that's what we can do
Yeah. Yeah.
with
There are
animals.
some dogs that aren't gonna love grooming. I like my doctor. I think she's great, but I also don't crave going. She's a wonderful person, and because of that, I feel safe there,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what we need to do. Maybe the dog isn't gonna love it, and for some dog trainers, that's a hard sell, but I'm like, "But I don't love going to my doctor." Even though I really like her and I trust her, that's not something, I mean, unless you are in pain, like, you're like, "Oh, thank God someone's gonna take care of this," and sometimes
Yeah.
we do see that with dogs. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, good, that was driving me crazy."
Yes.
Get that itch, get that mat that's keeping my leg from extending properly.
Uh, can't even imagine.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
recently saw some thing circulating about a sheep that hadn't been sheared in 6 years.
Oh, yeah, I've seen some images, they found him, like, he had been hanging out in some far backwoods or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
poor thing.
I forget how many pounds. It was like, I don't know, 50 pounds or maybe more.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was really a lot.
Well, and there are a lot of groomers who go in the assumption that this haircut is so important. It's skincare, it's hair care, like, this is part of keeping animals healthy. But I try to encourage groomers to think past today's health needs and do part of it. It's not in his best interest if it also scares the dickens out of him,
Yeah.
because we're looking at a 15-year lifespan. And sometimes people say, "Well, he's already 10." I'm like, "Listen, I've met dogs at 14 or 15 as behavior cases because you know what? They still have grooming needs and they're not getting any healthier." So, at any age, we should be thinking about like, all right, the future groomings, which I believe, oh gosh, I know I did this the last time I had an interview too. I need to have the stats in front of me, but
Ah,
I had figured out how often the average dog gets groomed if they're getting groomed every month to 2 months and over 15 years. And really, that dog is gonna spend 2 weeks to 3 months worth of a 40-hour work week on a grooming table someplace
oh my God, at
in
least.
grooming. Yeah,
I'm
and
getting
if
my calculator out.
I know, right? So if
How
you
long
were
does the
gonna
average grooming take?
anywhere from an hour to 2 or 3 hours, depending, and
Okay,
I'm
so I'll
saying
pick
3 hours
2.
on the high end now because so many doodles are out there. Um, yeah.
Right.
They require a significant amount. So that animal is gonna be spending a significant amount of time. And if you had that all in one lump, you would definitely spend the first 2 days teaching them to be comfortable with it.
So about once a month, you said?
Yep. Once every month or 2 months. 1 to 2 months for an
Yeah,
hour
so
to 3 hours.
360 hours
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
average.
Yeah. Crazy, huh? It's a
Yeah,
lot of
which is
time.
9 weeks.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. So 2 weeks to 3 months worth of your full-time job with this one animal, you would definitely spend the first couple of days
Yeah.
making sure they were comfortable with it.
Yeah, and if
You
you can
wouldn't go
turn
in every day going, "Oh, no, not again." "What can we do?"
yeah, and the dog too, right? And all
Yeah.
that tension. You know what we didn't cover, which is really worth it to just put a minute in?
Mhm.
If you have time to help relax the dog before you even get started is optimal, but
Mm.
also at the end, just take just a few minutes. If you feel comfortable doing it, if you've got the training, we teach 4 different kinds of touch to use to relax the dog's body. When we do that, everything gets to be easier. The animal's starting out in a calm alertness and can really listen to what we're doing, what we're talking to them about. And then they end that way also. And this is so strategic for just everything. It's incredible. And it's a really value added thing because it's like going to a spa and they massage your feet or something. And
Mhm.
it's not part of cutting the hair, but it can make that animal crave that experience in a way that maybe he doesn't mind being groomed, but it may not be his favorite thing. But I'll bet you he's really going to love that little bit of relaxation time at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, yeah. I often refer to it as our goal is calm, comfortable, and cooperative.
Yes.
Because if you look at the dog who is enjoying his grooming and is a joy to groom, a dog who's very, very safe to groom, what do they happen to be? They happen to be very calm about it all. They happen to be comfortable with us and all the things that we need to do, and they
Yeah.
are cooperating the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's very, very safe to work with, but also a joy to work on.
Yeah. And it's not just easier and nicer, but it's also remember all those pheromones and everything are affecting us also.
Mm, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on, Casey.
I
We gave
always
them
love
so much.
talking.
We always have fun. I'll
Yeah.
I'll let the listeners know, but, like, Casey and I tried to record this before, but we just spent 3 hours hanging out.
Yeah, we did. We did. So
Catching
now
up
we're
and hanging
talking
out.
more
We're like,
frequently.
"What are we gonna talk about when we really do it?"
Yeah, it allowed us to get a little more organized because
Yeah.
we went a lot of places.
We did.
So, um, if any of your people want more information, I will send you all my links and everything. If they tell me
Yeah.
they come from you, I would be delighted to answer the questions, whatever. And it's just been a blessing to be here together. And thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for being on, and I will get all of the information and stuff to put into the show notes.
All right. Take care,
So,
everyone.
all right. Goodbye, everybody.